We really have to weed out people. You either love our culture or you don't. And so the easiest thing to do is not to teach people, oh, this is the way to operate. It's just to hire people that love to operate that way.
Hello, hello. Welcome to the Term Sheet Podcast. I'm Allie Garfinkel, senior writer here at Fortune. And every week on the Term Sheet Podcast, we go over the latest news and insights in venture capital, private equity, and startups. Every week, this is where you can listen to what makes some of the most exciting figures in the private markets tick. We did actually have some really big tech news this week. OpenAI and NVIDIA struck a $100 billion deal that essentially amounts to building data centers together. Every time I think the OpenAI numbers can't get bigger, lo and behold, they do. And it's important to say that as much as Microsoft has been a key supporter of OpenAI, if sometimes a complicated one, this, as much as anything, is a very, very key endorsement of OpenAI's trajectory, in my view. $100 billion coming out of NVIDIA that's on the top of the world. That is pretty affirming. It also makes a lot of sense, right? OpenAI needs this infrastructure if they're trying to sort of meet the demand for ChatGPT, and NVIDIA needs this infrastructure too. Now, in a turn of events that I'm sure will not surprise you at all, we are going to continue talking about AI, and I'm very excited about this week's guest. He is the CEO of one of the most read term sheets of this past year, Paul Copplestone, CEO and co-founder of Supabase. Now, for those not in the know, Superbase is an open source database infrastructure built on Postgres. Now, what all that means in short is that it allows users to more easily build a back end for apps. Now, the company is actually, in certain ways at least, named after the Nicki Minaj song Supabase. But don't let that fool you. The last time I talked to Paul, he had just raised $200 million in a Series D led by Excel, and currently he is rumored to perhaps be raising another round that values the company at $5 billion. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're like, Allie, you're bringing on more and more of these AI people. But I promise you, Paul is not what you expect. Paul is from New Zealand, among other things, but he is also a person with a genuinely global perspective that I've found really compelling and learned a lot from, and I think you will too. Here's Paul. Paul, welcome to the Term Sheet Podcast. I'm so excited you're here because I get to ask you a question that is going to facilitate, I know, one of my favorite answers because I've asked it to you before. Paul, why is your company called Superbase?
You're starting with the important ones. Well, yeah, that one was a mistake that stuck. Basically, we were trying to find a domain name, which is hard. And of course, at a base, we're a database company. And I was looking for some sort of superlative base, ultra base, or one of these. And super base was taken. So I saw Superbase, and it kind of sounded like the Nicki Minaj song, which I thought was funny at the time because we could make a bunch of memes about it, my co-founder and I. So I bought it, and then we put the website on it. And unfortunately, there was no opportunity to change it after it kind of went to the front page of Hacker News. So we stuck with it.
So basically what you're telling me is you came up with the name and thought, "Oh, this is kind of fun." And then it was the name. And I mean, have you ever considered changing it, or is it's Superbase? It's Nicki Minaj related for in perpetuity.
I consider changing it very often. Unfortunately, it's going to be very hard to do that at this stage. But I don't know if Superbase inspires a lot of kind of enterprise-ready confidence. I can't imagine in board meetings of Fortune 100 how Superbase gets pitched. But we'll worry about that, I guess, when we get to IPO.
Well, it seems to be working out. It seems to be working out pretty well so far. Tell us, before we started recording, you and I were talking about how there's actually never been a better time for database nerds.
Yeah.
What exactly does Supabase do, and why is it sort of ripping in this environment?
Yeah, so Superbase is a Postgres developer platform. Basically, we host databases, so we host data for people. You can imagine if you're going to build an application, maybe like Instagram, you need somewhere to store all your users, store their friends, and all these sort of things. So you can put it in a database, and the world's most popular database is called Postgres, and that's what we host. We host this open source database for people, and so yeah, that's pretty much what we offer.
Supabase is much like other technology we've covered on this podcast, underpinning so many different things that people don't even know about. And Postgres is actually something that is underpins so many of our lives, and we for if you're not a technical person. So like to the most non-technical person you can imagine, Paul,
Yeah.
why does Postgres matter? Why do databases matter?
Yeah, okay. So easiest to start with databases. If you imagine a business, right? What you see is kind of like the tip of the iceberg. That's the website. Imagine Twitter, right? There's this website and there's an app that you interact with. But underneath that is this like whole infrastructure. And as you go down, it gets kind of deeper and more technical. That's the bottom of the iceberg. And right at the bottom of this is a database where everything is stored and all the connections are made and a lot of the heavy logic that's going on and the engineering goes into that. So that's the database. Basically, every business in the world needs a database to operate. There's very few that can operate without data. The reason why Postgres is kind of the leader now is because of this thing in technology called open source. It's a bit unique. I remember I described it to my wife, who's not a technical person, and she was fascinated by it because it's kind of a weird thing within technology where a bunch of geeks like to contribute their free time to things for free. Like they'll build things for free, and there's a whole ecosystem of technology that people are spending time building, putting it out on the world. Anyone can see the code, they can take the code, and it's kind of like the sharing economy within the technical space. So the world's most popular database is an open source one now, and it's been around for about 40 years in various variations, and now it's kind of having a moment, and that's where we were super lucky. Around 2020, we could see that it was kind of becoming very popular, and we thought, well, we want to build a database company. How can we give back? And so we wanted to build our company around Postgres. So a lot of our success has been really trying to contribute back to the Postgres ecosystem, and then the success of Postgres giving us a really good tailwind.
Paul, I want to go back to the beginning. When were you first aware of open source software, and did it coincide with the desire to be an entrepreneur, or did they happen separately?
Oh, well, that's a good question. I can't remember. Well, I've been a techie for kind of my whole life. Well, since I left school, I learned like kind of self-taught and did it throughout my college while I was studying. So I guess I learned about open source then. I can't actually remember. It's just kind of quite prolific. The one story I can give back from those days is I actually started with databases. It was a different one. It's one that's created by Microsoft. And I loved the idea of these kind of real-time databases. And I thought, my father's an entrepreneur. And I thought, I'm going to build a business about databases. This is when I probably was about 20 years old. And I'm from New Zealand. We don't really have the concept of startups, or at least we didn't when I was growing up. And so I just kind of pitched this idea, wrote it in an email, and sent it off to a millionaire that I knew, saying, "Hey, can I?" He was a tech millionaire, and I didn't really know him that well, but I pitched him the idea, and he promptly said it was a terrible idea because it's kind of already been done. So, so that's kind of funny because now, 15 years later or 20 years later, I'm basically doing that. I went back and read it, and it's essentially what I was pitching is kind of this real-time database system with a good dashboard and everything.
So it's completely full circle. And also, I love
Mhm.
you sending it off to a random tech millionaire that just saying, you seem to know something about this.
I didn't know what else to do, you know? How do you go about starting a company? There was no sort of Y Combinator or anything in New Zealand, so, yeah, definitely no, it took me a long time to even realize what the term startup was.
The Superbase story I wrote last year was among our most read term sheets of the last 12 months.
Oh,
Uh,
cool.
yeah, cool, right? Um, but since our story in April, I know Supabase has grown quite a bit. Many attribute that growth to vibe coding. Walk us through the kind of growth you've seen since raising $200 million.
Yeah, so that kicked off in December. Believe it or not, we only talked, I think, not even 6 months ago, so it's pretty wild. Um, since December, like, everything's just been a bit of a rocket ship internally. Um, the kind of vibe coding, we classify them as AI builder platforms, and they started with Bolt, Lovable, V0, these ones, and then they've proliferated, and throughout many of them, they've chosen Superbase to be the back end of the tool, and largely because we provide this ease of use, but we also provide a bunch of tools that you need, logins and everything. So it's very easy to put generate an app on top of Superbase, the entire backend for you. And this has meant that even as more pop up, they've started to use Superbase. And because of this, there's this halo effect where people just sign up, they hear about it. We've kind of become more popular even for non developers. Today, I think the ratio of signups, direct signups to AI builders, maybe there's about 30% directly attributable to AI builders. So it's kind of had a growth effect. But our sign up rate has just skyrocketed. I think we're nearly at 4 million developers now, up from in September 1 million developers. So it's just, yeah, it feels like a bit of a rocket ship.
I was going to say, how do you handle that level of good chaos? Because that kind of growth has to be a vortex.
Yeah. Well, that's not easy. Been the thing. Everything's going great. Like, the numbers all look good. The main thing that breaks is like, for us, a really good customer experience. We For example, we never used to, or we have never said that we will support the free tier. We have a very generous free plan, and we said we won't do support for the free plan. Well, we actually did. We always supported the customers. If anyone was blocked, we'd jump in. Unfortunately, we can barely keep up with the paid customers now. You just can't. The number of customers this year will go up maybe 6x paying customers or 7x, and you can't ramp your own team that fast. And so our head count, the number of people inside Superbase, will go from 95 to about 200. That's already going to break a lot of things. So largely it's just trying to figure out the cultural shifts, how the team shifts, and we're trying to do that very well. We have very low attrition. We have very we kind of hire people who are very high skilled. We don't do interns or anything because we're an async culture. It's too hard. So we keep our bar really high, but just growing that fast internally causes a lot of breakages.
And how do you manage those breakages?
Um, Well, you kinda have to let them break, to be honest. You expect them to break in certain ways, and you know it's going to be the case. You can't really resist it. You have to preempt it. A lot of it's actually not so much. I think we've got so many experienced people. They understand things break, things are a problem. The hardest thing is the culture, because people come in. You can't really teach culture. You have a way of operating. Like, we're very flat. We're almost like an open source community ourselves internally. We don't have much management structure, and so the way we operate is very trust based. And you figure things out. We'll throw you a bunch of problems. We'll give you as much rope as you can take. And people come in, and they've been at other companies that they bring their own culture, and no fault of their own, but they know a way of operating that is not the Superbase way. And so a lot of my time this year is just making sure that they understand this is how we do it. We're low ego. We'll give you a bunch of work hard. We're not going to check in. You're on your own. Tell us if you're getting swamped. These type of problems. Yeah, a lot of people kind of getting close to burnout, but managing, and we just jump in where we can.
Walk us through how you're thinking about hiring, how you tend to think about hiring generally, and how that might be evolving right now in this environment.
Yeah. Well, the first thing is because I said we're remote, we're actually completely async. We like each team might have one meeting per week. So for an engineer in a team, they might have 30 minutes FaceTime with someone, and all the rest of their time throughout the week is just working on their own. Now, that's amazing for some people and it's horrific for others. We learned that pretty early on. And we had people who thought, oh, I've done remote work. And what they meant was, throughout COVID, I worked in a company where we're all in the same time zone. And we learned that no, we really have to weed out people. You either love our culture or you don't. And so the easiest thing to do is not to teach people, oh, this is the way to operate. It's just to hire people that love to operate that way. So you either fit our culture to start off with or you don't. The other really important thing in the culture is this kind of egoless and meritocratic environment or way of operating. The way that manifests usually is because we're async. Like, for example, you might suggest something, and it could be a day or two before someone comes and reads your message, and then they'll push back, they'll have another idea. And in that moment, of course, like you have had a day to brew on your idea, which seems amazing because you've probably not thought too much about other ways of doing it. So you need to basically be quite egoless that, oh, we're looking for the truth, the best solutions. We're not looking for my solution. And there's always so many ways to solve technical problems. So a lot of it's finding people who really fit that type of egoless, truth-seeking mentality.
One of the things I found really interesting the first time we met was this sort of very clear hiring philosophy you had. That, for instance, you were interested in hiring other founders. Where does that come from and why has it stuck?
Founders are great because they kind of you can leave them to their own devices. So we'll just give them whole problems, and then we just don't need to check in with them. The other thing is they're really low ego. So yeah, I talked about being low ego. One of the things that we really commonly see is that we have to interview for it. It's very hard to figure out, but the place where you see it the most is right at the end when you're making the offer. So when they start negotiating for their contract. And you'd think mostly it's because of the numbers, but actually the thing that happens is they go from talking to a founder right at the end and being very nice to talking to someone from the people team. But little do they know that the person that they're talking to is on the people team is my sister. So I'm going to learn about how they're negotiating and what type of person they are at that final stage. And the tendency has always been, we've gone all the way through this journey. They seemed good up until now. Should we take them? Now it's just a hard no. We're so good at saying no at that stage.
That's awesome. I just love the idea too of because so many people act poorly in thinking they're gonna get away with it. But I love the idea of being like, actually, that was my sister, and she and I were having dinner the other night. And no, actually, it does matter how you treat other people, especially when nobody's looking.
Yeah, yeah. It's like that saying. What's the one? Like, you want to know what a person's like, see how they treat the waiter. There's pretty much the same analogy.
Is a no assholes policy especially important when you're dealing with developer communities?
Um, I don't. No, I don't know. Like for hiring, maybe, but there's a lot of companies like we. This filters out into our social media. There's a lot of competitors in our space, and you'll see often, actually, in the early days, we counter-position it against another company called Firebase, was acquired by Google. They're kind of a full backend as a service as well. We counter-position against them because it was very good for our growth. We became part of the um, the narrative when you're getting started. Should I choose Firebase? Should I choose Superbase? This one's open source, this one's not. So it became a very good mechanism. And what we had is a lot of our community was saying, hey, you know, Superbase is amazing, Firebase sucks. And we were jumping in and saying, hey, no, actually, Firebase is actually pretty awesome. I love it, which is true. We don't need to be an asshole. We got a lot of inspiration from Firebase, and we just want to make something better. And I think there's a lot of companies, especially in the tech Twitter world, that take the opposite approach. They'll shit on any competitor, which I think is a bit low integrity. Most of our competitors are actually pretty good. We've got differences, but like it's kind of obvious that that person's one-sided, and I think you fall into a little bit of audience capture, if you know the term on social media, where if you're an asshole, then you get a lot of views and you continue being an asshole. We just haven't done that
I was
throughout our
gonna say
journey.
it's popular. It's
It's
actually
popular.
yeah,
Yep.
it's sort of in vogue right now. I
Yeah.
think a lot of people would even argue. But the reason I ask about it in terms of developer community specifically is because there's sort of no hiding. Developers are either devoted fans or your worst critics. And I think a lot of people outside of tech don't. I mean, do you think people outside of tech are sort of aware of the power of developer communities?
I don't know. I think I live in a bubble. I live in the tech bubble. Are you aware? I didn't. You're.
I wasn't before I was covering this.
Oh, really?
Definitely not. No,
Yeah.
no, not at all. I was sort of floored by not only the kind of fandom, but the level of commitment sort of to a specific tool or even a specific entrepreneur. I think it's really interesting from a
Yeah.
sociocultural lens, but it also means that there's a lot of responsibility. In a weird way, kind of like a journalist, you're beholden to an audience.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, you know, like this week I'm kind of backing off Twitter, but I know in the back of my mind, like that's to the detriment of the company. Like I need to be the voice of Superbase. I definitely think like yes, it's prolific in tech. You have to have these personalities, the cult of personality, and you kind of have a vibe. Every company has a vibe. I do see it in some other companies. I went to like the Figma conference and seeing all the, like, design people turn up, that was like a cult-like following. I was impressed. They're actually now my North Star of how to be as a company. Getting that level of fandom as we continue to grow would be amazing.
The goal is to be Figma-esque, it sounds
Yes,
like.
yes, for developers, yeah. Which I think Stripe has done pretty well. But, like, the people that I when I went to the Figma conference, it was like a festival. People were flying in from all over the world, and, like, they I don't know, it felt very, very fun.
If you could sort of look to the future, what is one question you would really want the answer to?
What is the AI trend in 2026, I think. You know, we're a company that rides every wave. That's pretty much our vibe. So, you know, I'm always trying to build for the next wave. That's pretty much it. So I don't want to look too far ahead in the future. I know databases will be around in 50 years. That's for sure. And I'm pretty confident it will be Postgres. So our intent is to build a generational company. The steps to get there are just year on year riding the next wave. That's pretty much it. And we've done it so far. For 5 years, we've had cycles. And I think vibe coding is here to stay. There's definitely a new mechanism for getting started. Um, and it's this AI is kind of a super cycle, this wave, but there'll be so many more like this throughout the next 5 years. I actually don't know what they are, and I have no clue how to pick them. I think there's stuff in memory, in voice that's still emerging, so something in there. And I think a lot of the stuff around glasses, lenses, geospatial mapping, which I spent a lot of time actually doing in another startup. I'm pretty excited for that work. So yeah, I think mostly I want to know where the technological trends are going.
And you've mentioned vibe coding. What has most surprised you about the rise of vibe coding? Particularly the way it's sort of crushed it over the last 6 months.
I'm pretty surprised at how successful people are able to be, and by the numbers as well. Actually, the retention rates for people who are in that classification of AI builder are the same as our non-AI builder, like our traditional developer community. And so they're coming in and they're using it and they're becoming successful. And like the nice thing, you know, we were discussing this before, is for a long time, 5 years, I've been hanging out with my friends and I just talk about startups or whatever. And now, like, I was just in Zurich and I was catching up with a friend who I haven't seen in 3 years. And I was telling him, you know, business is going good. He said, "Oh, what's the name of your startup?" And I said, "Oh, Superbase." And he said, "Oh, I'm a customer." And he had built an app and he was showing me he's not a techie. So it's quite cool. The surprising thing is how successful people are becoming. Yeah, and I think, you know, the common saying is, you know, only get better from here. I think this is, you know, the case of course. Like this is just the first year of vibe coding, where it's going to evolve and the kind of audience that's going to grow from this, the tooling as it gets better and better around traditional developer workflows, I think is going to enable a lot of new builders in the world.
Well, it's sort of to this end, it sounds like part of what's happening is it's sticky. Oh, but both if you're someone who's very technically savvy and if you're not. Do you worry about how it affects programming jobs?
No, not at all. I think, like, what we see is most of the time it's actually, like, for example, our API engineers will come in and they might do a little prototype on, like, Livable or V0 or something like that, and then they'll kick it over to the design team, and what we're seeing from, like, enterprise customers is they're running these huge hackathons, but it's not for their engineers, it's actually just for, like, their product managers. So what they wanna do is kind of help the engineers, like, they've got a ton of ideas that they wanna brainstorm on, and then they still need all the engineers to, like, build out all of these things. So, I imagine it's just going to mean that there are more things for engineers to build later on.
Thinking about your experiences in past startups and in this one, if there's one piece of advice for founders listening, what is it?
I think, like, the number one thing as a founder, which is one of our principles, is Kaizen, which is the Toyota production system principle. It means continuous improvement from the CEO to the factory line worker. And it just means, like, iterate, iterate, iterate. That's pretty much it. So we do that. Everything in Superbase is an iteration. I can't remember any time we've done, like, a big bang change. Everything is like some small process improvement, some iteration that went well. We try things, they don't really go well. We stick with them, we do a small improvement. And a lot of our most successful things, like launch weeks, for example. Now, everyone does launch weeks in the developer community. Well, they were from some small idea that we had 5 years ago, and they kind of proliferated out, and they've been one of our most successful ways of marketing to the developer community. But, if we had just done one and seen the how it was kind of not that great, it wouldn't we could have dropped it at that point, but we always have this idea, well, how can we improve it? And that's the mentality that you have to bring to a startup, because if you try to do too much too soon, you'll just have a failure to launch.
Well, and it's one of the things that's very interesting about it is because a lot of the time the discourse around startups is the goal is to be a unicorn, the goal is to be a multi-billion-dollar company. But the only way to get there is through small iterative choices every single day.
100%.
Now, I have to ask you a New Zealand question. How has being from New Zealand informed your perspective as a founder? Because I think it has. I think if you say it hasn't,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm going to believe you.
Well, I don't I I don't know, because, like, that's kind of like, asking someone or telling, like, an American, you've got an accent," and the American's like, "No, I don't have an accent, you've got an accent." So, I don't know, but I do hear all the time from the people that I'm fundraising from, they always say, "Ah, you're a really unconventional founder." I don't know if that's a compliment or not, but I've heard it every single fundraising. So I must be doing something different.
Well, also, I mean, to be fair, can you tell the story of how Excel pursued you really quickly? Because it is a
That
great
was
story that is New Zealand centric.
that was a fun one. We had raised in, I think, September last year, and then I just wanted to put my head down and get to work, so I went to New Zealand, and I was working, and then, kind of, Excel, one of the guys at Excel, Gonzo, was messaging me, and he said, we're pretty keen on Superbase." And I said, "Well, sorry, but you would have to fly to New Zealand. I'm busy working." And he said, "All right, I'm booking my next flight." And I was like, "Oh, what do you mean?" And he literally sent the message, and I promptly tweeted that so that the world knew. And then he came, and I was trying to work, and I just said, here are kind of our terms. We're not planning to raise for a year, so you've got to, like, meet the terms." And so after a while, he went away, and he then kind of called in the big guns, Arun, the partner on the growth team. And then Arun said, "Well, I'm coming to New Zealand too." So I went to Queenstown. We spent the night, had dinner together, and then yeah, we met the next day, and they gave me a term sheet. So it was pretty cool, actually, getting a term sheet in New Zealand, then flying all the way to New Zealand. I thought that was pretty cool, and I promised them that probably the next board meeting next year we'll do that in New Zealand. So we'll repeat the process.
Well, the thing I was floored by when I heard this story is getting to New Zealand is actually not easy from California
It's
or
hard,
from
especially.
anywhere.
And it's not just getting to New Zealand. This is not Auckland. I live in a place called Wanaka, and it's this mountain town. You're gonna fly to Queenstown, then you're gonna drive over these mountains. it's not easy. So, and Gonzo did it twice. So I knew they were committed. That's why I knew I could drive the price up.
Well, and I know I also I'd forgotten that you tweeted it out. But that also does make sense. You live a lot of life online. So my final question for you, Paul, what meme describes your life right now?
Yeah, it's probably that the guy sitting in the fire, everything's on fire. This is okay, you know. I think that's kind of how it feels within a startup. But the nice thing about being async is you can kind of turn your computer off and you just pretend like all of that's not happening. Yeah, it's all going good. It's all going like it's all breaking, but in a good way. So
This is
I think
okay.
that's the meme. This is
This is
okay. Yeah,
okay. This is
yeah.
okay. Paul, thank you so, so much.
Thanks, Ellie. I appreciate it.
And that was Paul. This interview, of course, makes me think a lot about a lot of things. There's some of the obvious ones, the future of programming, vibe coding, AI, but it also made me think a lot about work, about company culture. Paul has clearly built a unique company culture at Supabase that is definitionally remote, and I think there is something to be learned from that. I actually think perhaps there's nothing more quietly radical in this moment, especially in the midst of this sort of wider return to office push, than saying, no, we are a global, remote company where everyone finds ways to come together. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you soon. Term Sheet is a Fortune magazine podcast. Our producer editors are Alana Stev and Allison Rogers. Our executive producer is Lydia Randall. Our production manager is Sam Freund. Fortune's head of video is Adam Bannicky.